I understand intellectually that there's nothing I can do to see the truth of what is. And it's clear that the truth of life already is, so it doesn't matter what I do. In that sense, seeking is irrelevant.
Well, I don't think that I normally use the word, but obviously we've talked about it. It comes up. It's just like a useful a useful word in this work. Um, Let me just do one quick thing. Just give me a moment. So let me just talk to that a bit, because seeking. And if you ask me this next week or in 2 weeks, I will probably say something completely different. But I don't have like a definition for it. But what I would say is, seeking is any kind of um, energy that moves into thought and looking for what will fulfill you in thought. Now, what happens is people usually do this trying to satisfy the sense of lack in life through work, relationships, money, all that kind of thing. But it's the same in spirituality. So there isn't much difference. The big difference is that if you're looking, if you're trying to satisfy that sense of lack in some kind of spiritual teaching, you're more likely to get at the root of it. But you can get as lost in spirituality as in materialism. Um, so now, in the more kind of contemporary use of that word in spiritual circles, it's talking about more specifically in the spiritual sense. But I don't see any difference between. There isn't a big difference between seeking in materialist sense, in worldly experiences, or in spiritual experiences. Um, and when you say there's nothing I can do, that's not correct. Or I wouldn't say it that way. I would push back on that and say there is a way of seeing by looking, um, that it can be clarified. And so what you can look at is that which appears as thought that seems to be more real than thought. And then the complexity of that can be broken down, and there's all these stages and different kind of approaches, and Buddhist approach, and they're like very methodical with a lot of techniques and pointings, but it's all about seeing how thought appears to be more than thought, and that's where the illusion is.
So the thoughts that can be looked at and that feel more real than thought, is that seeing or looking also just thought?
Well, the seeing is not thought. What sees is not a thought. So that which knows, this is very tricky to speak to this, right? Semantically, because everything I say is going to point to more thoughts. Um, but that which sees is not the thought. So there's a seeing that is empty. Is prior to thought, you could say. So that which sees, that can see. Let me make a little more room for you there. That which sees can see that something seemed to be a thought, something seemed to be real, and then it is seen to be a thought in some form. And so if time, for example, and so in Buddhism, they speak of anatta, no self, and you hear this a lot more in like Advaita circles now. It's a bit of like a crossover of different kind of ways of teaching, but to see that everything that I can call myself is a thought, that's anatta. And that's where they say there is no self, because I cannot, there isn't anything that I can find to be self. Same with time. Now, if you see that anything that you can know as time only exists in the mind as thought, then what are you going to seek for? How are you going to seek? If there's no place than this and no thing other than this, no other time other than this, seeking stops. When that is seen very clearly, then seeking stops. But all kind of seeking, but you can still then live within what this is, what this life is. You still live, and there's experience, and there can be pursuit of enjoyment, but it's a different kind of way of living that it's hard to describe the difference. But it's freedom. It's freedom within the relative. But that's where seeking ends, when you find, in a sense. What do you find? Because I say this a lot of teachers point to, which I think is valuable to point to stop seeking. But I say instead, just look in the right place, keep seeking. But that energy, direct it to clarify what is real and what is thought. And so, but what is real? Everything is real. Everything is reality. Now, the problem is what I confuse to be something that it is not. I confuse my thoughts to be a self. And so the distinction is, it used to be self, now it is thoughts. They're completely different in nature. And when, for example, I think I understand this reality, I have an understanding of it, a map of it, and then I realize that how I thought reality was, is thoughts. It's not how reality is. And that I define as finding. You realize what it seemed to be a thought, or what seemed to be reality, is thought. It's an interpretation. And this can be seen so deeply to the point where there is nothing that can define self, there is nothing that can define reality, and it is seen to be extremely obvious. Like there's no confusion about that. And that's finding, but there's different degrees, right? You can see more and more and more deeply. And that can then get mapped out in like stages of awakening.